Nothing makes me more angry or more sad than to see somebody's dream get crushed by somebody else who is with the simple wag of their finger. It's heartbreaking. But I see that. I see that a lot. And I could you imagine how I've actually felt when I heard people say, I wouldn't pay for my kid to go to music school. God forbid he ever become a bass player. A guy said that to me in my driveway one day without being a braggart. I have a pretty great house, you know, like a really great house. And I looked around and I said, you know, that paid for this. Encourage your kid. You just want to grab him and go, are you crazy? You know, life's too short. You gotta reach for that ring, man. At least try it. I'd always said, even as a boy, I was going to be I did it and failed instead of a coulda, shoulda, woulda. I'll tell you one thing at 50, I don't have any regrets.
Everybody has a story, and there's something to be learned from every experience.
We all have the ability to put forth the best of ourselves.
If you want respect, you give respect.
Honor is worth sacrificing yourself for if necessary.
Each step along the way is just a life lesson in humility.
We are not meant to be perfect. We're meant to be whole.
Assess and then make the leap of faith.
Instinct is a force that lives within us, and we call upon it when we need to.
Do things that are important. Don't put it off till tomorrow.
Follow your own muse. Always.
Use your life as a class. He is a rock star. But growing up in New Jersey, John Bon Jovi had dreams and a vision that went far beyond just being a lead singer in a rock and roll band. He wanted to do more. Bon Jovi has been one of the biggest bands in the world for almost 30 years. They have sold over 100 million albums and continue to sell out arenas and stadiums around the world again and again and again, and they show no signs of slowing down. Back in the 90s, when success and fame threatened to tear his band apart at the seams, John took control and never looked back. The themes in his songs, optimism, love, and a belief in the power of we, are the same core values that he holds most dear in his life. It's what keeps him pushing to reach the next mountaintop, and one after that.
When I was 7, my folks, you know, like every other parent, want you to try to do something, say, take you to guitar lessons. And I remember really well, this guy smoking a pipe in a little doorway, you know, like a closet almost. So he's stinking up the room with this pipe. He's falling asleep while he's teaching you, and he's going, this isn't fun, this isn't cool, this is nothing. And I'm dying on this guy's, you know, pipe. Went home, threw that acoustic guitar down the basement stairs, broke a tuning peg, boing, boing, boing. It sat down there till I was 13. And a man by the name of Al Parinello moved in across the street from my childhood home, and he was in a club band. He was like the hip guy. And he showed us how to play songs. And he showed me how to play House of the Rising Sun. And he said, you know, if you don't know this next week, you know, and I came back and I didn't know it. He said, don't waste my time, man. Just get out of here, leave. That was great. It was the best thing he ever said to me. Because if he coddled me and said, I wouldn't have taken it seriously. But he said, don't waste my time. You know, get out of my basement. I got a family upstairs, get lost. I learned it. Then I learned the next one. I learned the next one. When you learn a song, you start to think about songs. When you think about songs, you want to write songs. When you write songs, you get to be here. You know, and so it was at his encouragement, thanks to his encouragement, I stayed with it. And, you know, there's a medallion that I give to people on our tours since 1986. It's a diamond medallion in the shape of the Superman logo, and it has the slippery when wet road sign on it, the 2 little tire tracks. By today's standards of bling that these guys wear and do and be, and, you know, it's a joke. But this little medallion I gave to our most intimates in 1986 at Madison Square Garden on the Slippery When Wet tour. You have to do 2 world tours, every leg of each tour. If you don't make it through every leg of the tour, you don't get one. So you have to do 2 world tours. You have to be with me for a number of years before you get one. There's about 150 in existence. People took great pride in ownership of those. Al Parinello took mine to his grave, and that's where mine went. But that's like, it's a special thing, and that was a special man in my, in my life. In 1978 and 79 and 80, when those pictures were hanging on your wall, they were pictures of Led Zeppelin with a 747. It was bigger than big. The vision of grandeur was there. Girls and guitars and, money and fast cars and rebellion, not having to work for the man. So I was 16, 17. I didn't have any great responsibilities yet. But one thing I did have was a single-minded, laser beam focus that there was nothing going to distract me from being a better singer, a better writer, and a better player. Well, my parents did reinforce my optimism. They believed that you could be what you want to be and work hard, never say never. Whatever you wanted to do was at your fingertips. You just had to work hard to get it. They came to the realization early on that if I was going to be playing in a bar at 3 in the morning, at least they knew where I was. And I literally was in those bars until 2, 3 in the morning. Go to high school with sunglasses on, which was, in retrospect, wonderfully single-minded, but talk about everything on, on one number on the roulette wheel. There was nothing to fall back on. But it was part of that beautiful, romantic, I was luckier than lucky because it worked out. But in my hometown, you worked in a factory, you joined the service, or you wrote a hit song. I grew up in the shadow of New York City, the greatest city in the world, with all its media. But you still had the protection of the tunnel and the bridge to go and develop it. You're learning to play the guitar, you're learning to sing, you're learning to perform in front of people, you're playing in bars in New Jersey. I had this second cousin who I didn't know before and really didn't know after, who owned a recording studio. And so that's the place where music was made. And my dad asked him to come and see me play because I was so driven and single-minded that he said, at least tell my kid if he's wasting his time. And the guy graciously came to the show and he said, your band stinks, but you're all right. He says, and if you ever, need any more advice, give me a shout. So when I got out of high school, I quit that band that I was just a member of at the time. I was just the singer in someone's band. Having already quit my own cover band because I knew even out of high school, you had to play your own music or forget it. So I went to this distant relative and I asked him if I could come to the studio to watch and gopher. Whatever you want, I'll be happy to do. And he was gracious enough to allow me to do that for a couple of years. So I'd go for this, go for that. $50 a week and the opportunity to go in there in the middle of the night and record my demos or on weekends. And they kept a tally of things and, you paid it off when you were done. But it was also an incredible learning experience, if only for one thing. I learned that the bigger the star, the nicer the person. Anyone who was anyone was in that place recording records at that time. The biggest stars in rock and roll history, the Rolling Stones, were so incredibly gracious to a kid, you didn't forget it. And I still haven't forgotten it 30 years later. Mick Jagger saying, how's those demos going? You're like, good, good. That was crazy, crazy, crazy. So for those couple of years, it was unbelievable. And even if you just saw them in passing, you were there, breathing the same air. If you don't believe in yourself more than anything, you're already, behind the 8 ball. You've got to have that. And if you're going to truly succeed, You know, there's people telling you no every step along the way. And that takes determination, single-minded, unbelievable focus that you are willing to fight everybody and turn the TV set over in order to get the job done. I didn't have a band at that time. I didn't have a manager. I didn't have anything. I had an idea. And that single-minded naivete and romantic vision and version of what the music business was, I thought to myself, I'm frustrated. Nobody's picking up on this cassette that I'm distributing in the mail with my Dear Sir letter. And I thought, who is the loneliest man in the music business? The DJ. And I thought, here's a guy that has no clue if anyone's listening to him, hasn't a clue of what his influence is, but he still had a lot of influence. How do I contact the DJ? So there was a brand new radio station starting here in New York City, just on the outskirts.
New York's newest rock station, 103.5 WAPP.
They were so new that, fortunately for me, they didn't have a receptionist. And I went to that radio station, and I walked in the door, and the DJ was literally on the air. So he looked through the window, and he hesitated, and he gave me the, 1 second sign. He spun the record and poked his head out like, what? And I says, I'm here, I have a cassette. I told him who I was, what I had done, why I was frustrated. And he said, hang around, we'll talk when I'm done. And he did. And he said, we're doing a homegrown record. And I thought to myself, it's not enough for me. I don't want to be a part of your homegrown record. I don't want a singles deal. And reluctantly, I agreed. But what happened then is not only did that song get played in New York City, but that station was owned by a chain of stations. And then subsequently, I got airplay in Chicago, in Detroit, in Denver, in Tampa, and it started to snowball. And all those same A&R guys went on their desks here in New York and started calling up. And I put together the band for what was supposed to be 3 weeks. And 28 years later, I can't get rid of them.
You're watching Masterclass with John Bon Jovi.
We got our record deal. I signed it in 1983. We worked 4 band albums from 83 till 90, never leaving the road. 2 of which were monstrous albums, one called Slippery When Wet. Still, I dare say, one of the top 100 for sure, biggest selling albums of all time. Followed by New Jersey, which was another monster record. So you went from being a guy in a rock band that went from bars to having a record deal. There wasn't a lot of things that change to suddenly you are the CEO of a corporation and you've got millions of dollars and you got people fawning over you and you got your parents coming to you for advice and you're like, you're making that funny face like, what? I'm 25 years old. What do I know about anything? With that, the world changed. But in truth, we didn't. We were still as afraid and insecure and cocky and confident as we ever were. So in a weird way, we sort of held on to each other, even though we were coming apart at the seams. That was supposed to be the first end of the band. And ultimately, we were led to help. Not a psychiatrist, but more of a mediator. This man's name was Lou Cox. And because maybe I was either